The midday sun burned relentlessly over the village square, turning the air heavy and shimmering with heat. Dust clung to every surface, the wooden boards of the auction platform, the cracked earth beneath it, and the worn fabric of the little girl's dress. The noise that had filled the place moments ago, the shouts of bidders, the stomping of boots, the clinking of coins, had faded into an eerie stillness. Every other girl had been led away, each claimed by someone with a quick exchange of money. But at the far end of the stage, one child remained. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her tiny arms wrapped around a tattered rag doll whose stitched smile was beginning to unravel. Her bare feet dangled above the ground, dusty and calloused. Her eyes were not red from crying, they were dry, almost hollow, as if the well of her tears had run dry long before today. She did not plead. She did not speak. She only stared at the ground, as though bracing herself for whatever came next. The auctioneer, a man with a sun-weathered face and a voice worn from years of shouting over crowds, glanced at her and shook his head. "No one will take her," he muttered under his breath, almost as if speaking the words aloud would make them less true. Around them, the last few curious onlookers began to drift away, their shadows stretching long across the dirt. The square was almost empty now, except for the girl, and the silence that seemed to wrap around her like a shroud. The road into the village was quiet, save for the crunch of boots against gravel and the faint creak of a worn leather satchel. A man in his early 50s made his way toward the square, his posture slightly stooped from years of farm work. His clothes were plain, faded trousers, a sun-bleached shirt, and a brimmed hat that shielded his weathered face. This was Mr. Cole, a widower known by most in the village but spoken of rarely. Since his wife had passed 2 winters ago, he had lived alone on a modest farm at the edge of town, his days spent tending to crops and livestock, his nights quiet except for the wind rattling the shutters. He hadn't come here for anything extraordinary, only to deliver a sack of grain to the mill and perhaps pick up a few supplies. Yet, as he drew nearer to the square, he noticed a change in the air. The usual bustle of the market had dulled to an unusual stillness. Curious, he slowed his pace, his eyes narrowing against the glare of the sun. When he reached the edge of the square, his gaze landed on the wooden auction stage. Everyone else had gone, save for the auctioneer and a single small figure sitting motionless at the far end. The sight stopped him mid-step. There she was, a girl no older than 8, clutching a rag doll as if it were her last anchor to the world. Something in her stillness, in those distant eyes, pulled at a place in his heart he thought had long gone quiet. "Mr. Cole stepped closer, his boots stirring the dust into small clouds that drifted lazily in the heat. The auctioneer looked up at him with a weary, almost dismissive glance, as if expecting nothing more than idle curiosity. "She's the last one," the man said flatly, nodding toward the girl. "Weak. Sickly, maybe. Not worth much. Nobody's wanted her all day." His tone carried no malice, only the blunt resignation of someone who had already given up on her fate. Mr. Cole didn't answer right away. He studied the child for a moment, noticing the thinness of her arms, the way her shoulders curled inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, invisible. But then her eyes flickered up, just for an instant, and he caught something there. It wasn't fear, nor was it hope. It was the quiet, almost unbearable look of someone who had already decided that nothing in the world would change for her. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "If you're interested, make an offer. She'll work for her keep, though I doubt she'll last long." Mr. Cole took off his hat, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. When he spoke, his voice was steady but soft. "I'm not here to buy her," he said, each word deliberate. "I'm here to give her a home." For a moment, the square seemed to still even more. The auctioneer blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. A few lingering onlookers turned their heads, their murmurs rippling through the air like a sudden gust of wind. The sun had dipped low by the time they reached Mr. Cole's farm, the fields bathed in the soft gold of evening. The little girl sat at the wooden kitchen table, her small hands resting in her lap, her rag doll propped against the edge. She didn't speak, only watched him move about the room with quiet caution, as though ready to retreat at the first sign of harshness. Mr. Cole set a pot on the stove, the aroma of simmering stew slowly filling the warm, lamplit space. It had been a long while since he'd cooked for anyone but himself, and he found his hands moving with a care he hadn't felt in years, adding a pinch of salt, tasting, stirring, making sure it was just right. When the food was ready, he placed a steaming bowl in front of her. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "Just eat." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, as if testing the truth of his words, she lifted the spoon and tasted the stew. Her eyes flicked up toward him briefly, and the faintest curve appeared on her lips, a small, fragile smile, but the first he had seen from her. That night, instead of curling up on a cold floor, she lay beneath a patchwork quilt in a small, clean bed. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but for the first time in years, she slept without fear. Spring sunlight spilled across the fields, turning the young grass a vibrant green. The air was alive with the hum of bees and the distant song of meadowlarks. The little girl, her cheeks now round with health, her hair brushed and neatly tied, ran barefoot through the rows, chasing the wind with laughter that rang across the farm. Her rag doll, once clutched like a shield, now bounced freely in her hand as she twirled in the open space. Mr. Cole stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming his calloused hands. He watched her with quiet contentment, the corners of his mouth lifting into a smile that reached his eyes. In her joy, he saw the ghost of a life she might have lost, and the proof that it had been worth saving. A neighbor passing by on the dirt road slowed his wagon, tipping his hat in greeting. "Never thought I'd see you raising a little one, Cole," he called out. "Why'd you take her in?" Mr. Cole glanced at the girl, now lying in the grass staring up at the clouds. His answer was simple, but carried the weight of everything that had passed. "Because nobody should be left behind." The neighbor nodded and moved on, leaving the farm wrapped in the sounds of spring. The girl laughed again, and Mr. Cole's heart felt lighter than it had in years. It was no grand gesture, no heroic act, just one choice, made in kindness, that had rewritten the story of two lives.